Calling this meeting of the Sioux Falls City Council Informational Tuesday, June 17th to order. First item on the agenda will be a staff report from Jim David, the Legislative Operations Manager.
Good afternoon, Jim David, Council staff. This morning, each of you should have received an email that concerned the National Citizen Survey, which is a 5-page survey that's administered by the National Research Center. If you recall, during last year's budget consideration, Council approved an amendment that moved the survey line item from finance to the Council budget. The cost is estimated at $22,000. Most of the survey is pretty well set, but we do have the options to create 3 to 5 custom questions, including an open-ended question. To identify these questions, a working session has been scheduled for next week, Wednesday, June 25th at 3:30 in Carnegie. The second item on the working session agenda will be a discussion to identify Sioux Falls' legislative priorities for the 2015 session. The results of this working session will be discussed with area legislators in early July with a final council vote expected by July 15th. If anyone is interested in participating in the legislative meeting, please talk with Council Chair Dean Karski. Be happy to entertain any of your questions.
Councilman Staggers?
Yes, Jim. Did I hear correctly that this $20,000 is for what again?
It's the National Citizen Survey. It's about 3,000 of them go out to Sioux Falls residents. I think we typically get about 34% response rate. It's been done in 2008, 2009, and then in January of 2013. So it was planned again for probably January of 2015.
Okay. Did we pay $20,000 in the past, or?
I'm not sure what we've paid in the past, but we budgeted in the budget. There is $25,000. So my guess is probably right around there.
Okay. Thanks.
So yep.
Any other questions? Thank you, Jim.
Yeah, thanks.
Next on the agenda, we have a Public Services Committee report. The meeting was held on Tuesday, June 10th.
Thank you. We held the meeting last week and discussed the ordinance in regards to landlords turning off the boiler systems in apartments. And the discussion resulted around this happened this last year to a tenant, and it got a little chilly in their apartment. The landlord, it's my understanding, turned it back on. But we had the discussion. It was a good discussion about if we wanted to adjust these dates, have them turned later, have it go till September 15th and move it up to May 15th, just with the climate change. We had a National Weather Service person here that did testify and gave some information, as well as a multi-housing person that was here and talked about it as well. At the end, there was a motion made to make those adjustments, but it died for lack of second. And it's just something that we all talked about, committed to making sure that we just kind of keep an eye on this as the climate changes, to make sure that we are protecting the citizens and making sure that landlords are keeping the heat on when they do see that the temperatures may dip here and there.
Any questions from the committee? All right, thank you. Next is City Council open discussion. Do we have any items for open discussion? Councilman Staggers?
Yes, this last Sunday I had the opportunity to go out to the event center and meet with somebody who knows quite a bit about siding on buildings. And we took a very close look at the siding on the event center. And there are a number of things that probably should be corrected. And what happened is that individual sent me his thoughts, which I passed out to the city council members. There's information on page 1, and then on the back there's further information of issues he found with the siding. The reason I'm bringing this to the city council is because, well, we should know what's going on, and also at the same time we have to make sure that the city is not responsible for redoing the siding if that does happen. Now, maybe it won't happen. I've given this information to Mark Cotter, And he's also involved in meetings dealing with the citing issue. But I thought that the city council should be aware of this.
Okay.
And also maybe in the future, if we could maybe have a briefing about how things are proceeding with the citing.
Thank you, Councilman Staggers. Do we have any questions? Jim, could you maybe set up a date for update on that, how that's going, please? Thank you. Any other items for open discussion? All right, thank you. Next on the agenda will be our first presentation, an update on the International Institute of Municipal Clerks Conference by Tamara Jorgensen.
Good afternoon, Council. Tamara Jorgensen, Assistant City Clerk. I'm here to provide you with an overview of the conference that I attended in Milwaukee, Wisconsin a few weeks ago for the International Institute of Municipal Clerks. As you all know, the members of your City Clerk's office staff are all members of the International Institute, and this conference is held as an annual event. So thank you for allowing me to attend this conference. This year's conference had close to 600 delegates, representing 48 states as well as delegates from Canada, Bermuda, England, Israel, Scotland, and the Netherlands. In order to save time, I have provided you with a copy of the classes that were held at the conference. The shaded information represents the classes that I attended, and the notes that are in red are the attendance numbers for each session. I thought it was important to show you the attendance information to illustrate to you the types of topics that are of stronger interest to our profession. In the 5.5 days of classroom availability, I attended 4 academic sessions, 3 general sessions, and 6 concurrent sessions. In addition, I provided the following services. I was asked to represent the state of South Dakota by carrying the South Dakota state flag in the opening ceremonies. It was an honor for me to be asked, and it was an honor for me to perform this duty. I volunteered and was selected to serve as a conveyor for an academy session for the class, Is Technology Undermining Our Ability to Effectively Communicate?, which was presented by Faith Wood. I volunteered and was selected to serve on the election committee for the IIMC annual business meeting that was held on Thursday morning. In between the classes, the delegates were encouraged to visit the vendor booths and obtain information regarding their products and services. Examples are codification services, computer hardware and software, disaster recovery services, document imaging, document storage, filing systems, imaging systems, indexing systems, microfilm equipment, office products, records management, telephone systems, and voting and election equipment. I have brochures and documents and handouts from the vendors, and they're available in the office if you wish to review. Some of the vendors represented were Laserfish, Unicode, Onboard, Clerkbase, ES&S, Highland Software, and American Legal Publishing. Again, I want to thank you for this opportunity. It was wonderful to network with my peers from other municipalities and other nations, and it was my pleasure to once again represent the City of Sioux Falls at the IIMC conference, and I look forward to doing it again in the future. Do you have any questions or comments?
Councilman Staggers?
Yes, Tamara, are these held every year, and how many of these have you attended before?
I believe this is my 4th conference, and yes, they are held every year. Next year, the conference is in Hartford, Connecticut. In 2016, it's in Omaha, Nebraska. 2017, it's in Montreal, Canada. And 2018, it's in Norfolk, Virginia. I believe every 5th year it's held internationally.
Tamara, thank you very much for your representing Sioux Falls, South Dakota very well. And thank you for your active participation in this event as well.
Thank you.
Any other comments, questions? I have one question. Tamara, what, after going to a few of these, what do you feel that going to these, talking to other people, other clerks and that, how does that enhance your job that you do here in our city?
Well, it gives us an opportunity to communicate with other municipalities and people in our peer group, and we're finding that a lot of municipalities have the same issues. We're learning how they deal with the issues. Everybody seems to have traffic concerns or crime concerns. I'm seeing a lot more classes going towards the people skills side of business, a lot less on-hand kind of training, like how to do your records and how to do Robert's Rules, which is kind of standard, but you're getting more into the people skills training where as technology advances, people are learning less and less how to have conversations or paying more attention to coworkers and what other people need. So you're going to see as you look through some of those charts, a lot of those classes are people-oriented classes. But it's also interesting to note that when you meet people internationally, we have a lot in common, but when the people got there from the Netherlands, and they're talking about their issues and their concerns as they pointed out to us, what you need to remember is several borders away from us, we have war. We have ongoing war. And so it kind of opens your eyes to what's really, truly important and what isn't.
Okay. Thank you.
You're welcome. Any more questions?
No.
No?
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
All right, next on the agenda will be proposed pilot project on Main Avenue in downtown by Public Works.
Good afternoon, Council. Dustin Powers with Community Development. Actually, I'll be kicking it off for us. This is going to be a joint presentation with Public Works as well as Confluence. Just a couple quick notes. This is on the regular agenda tonight. It's item number 42 under new business. So we wanted to come at the informational and give you a full presentation here. We do have Chad Cucker from Confluence with us here tonight, or at the informational with us here, so he can answer any questions about some of the design work that he's working on with Public Works Department on this project. What we're talking about today is a Main Avenue road diet, and we'll get into the explanation of what that is and how we came about what this project is going to entail. But first I wanted to start off by what was the impetus to start thinking about a road diet on Main Avenue. Over the years, over the past couple decades, there's been numerous conversations about the one-way traffic in downtown Sioux Falls, specifically Main Avenue as well as Dakota Avenue, so those north and south roads that go in one-way directions. So we've heard that conversation numerous times. Last fall, we actually kicked off a planning process for the 2025 downtown plan, and in that process we heard some of the same comments. A lot of the comments talked about the one-ways, the pedestrian activity along the one-ways and how to make them safer. The community, really likes the way Phillips Avenue has evolved over the years, and would like to try to see some of those aesthetics incorporated along Main Avenue and Dakota Avenue to kind of make those more pedestrian friendly. Along with the planning process for the 2025 downtown plan, we had a citizen work group made up of about 6 to 9 members in that work group that was really focused on specifically streets, infrastructure, and traffic. Within that group, one of their main discussions was about the one-way traffic and Main and Dakota Avenue. After that group had numerous conversations with us and staff, and within their group, they came up with the solution that we should start to study these again and see what we can do for a permanent implementation in the future. But what they suggested is that we try a pilot project first, see if it works before we implement it for the long term. So kind of within that, the city departments had a discussion and kind of thought that this would be something that we would propose, a pilot project that represents what the community is telling us. And so this is kind of our response to what the community has been talking about over the last couple of decades, actually, with Main and Dakota Avenue. To get a little bit about what a road diet is and why we decided on a road diet, Heath Hofteaser from the engineering department is going to come up and explain some of that information with you. Thanks.
Hi, everybody. Heath Hofteaser, Principal Traffic Engineer for the City Engineering. I just wanted to talk to you a little bit about how we got to the idea of doing the road diet that we're proposing tonight. And one of the first things is, through our citizen work group, there was a few key trends that everybody that was making comments. It was, we would like to see the street pedestrian friendly. We like to see streetscape elements. We want to see bigger furniture zones. We want to add parking if possible? Can we expand parking in any way? Then there was also the desire for two-way traffic that came out of the citizens' comments too that we heard. One of the first things we looked at was our overall traffic volumes on Main, Dakota, and the downtown as a whole, and how traffic flows through the downtown. And we looked at what would happen with two-way traffic on Main Avenue in the downtown and also Dakota Avenue. We were looking at both of those locations. And it's our downtown traffic, it's interesting when you start breaking it apart and analyzing it. You know, we have 22 hours of relatively calm traffic in the downtown. We have an AM peak and we have a PM peak. And it's on Main Avenue. It's really the PM peak is the major, the major thrust of traffic we see throughout or through the road. On average, we have 3,000 to 5,000 vehicles a day on Main Avenue, but during that PM peak hour, we have over 700 vehicles that use Main Avenue during that 1 hour. So it's when we started looking at the two-way streets, it was critical to try to come up with something that could still carry enough traffic during the PM peak that we don't cause intersection failures for our commuting traffic. When we started to look at two-way traffic, we identified between Main Avenue and Dakota Avenue 6 intersections that would have movements that would be operating at failure conditions, level of service F, where we'd have more vehicles trying to use lanes than could be served by the intersections in that situation. And the two-way traffic scenario we were looking at was where we'd have 1 lane northbound, 1 lane southbound, and a center lane that would be used as a two-way turn lane, utilizing the 3 existing lanes that were already on Main Avenue. And so then we kind of took a step back and said, okay, what would we need to do to these intersections to make them function under two-way conditions? And we ended up, there were 6 intersections where we'd have to widen out the intersections and add a turn lane in order to get the intersections operating at what would be considered acceptable level of service for our design standards. And when we kind of took a look at that, we decided that, you know, one of the overall themes we kept hearing was they wanted to see everything pedestrian friendly, make the intersections more pedestrian friendly, and widening to a 4-lane section in some of those areas just make the street wider, take longer to cross, and less pedestrian friendly. And plus, it would also be, you know, quite an expense to go out and widen a lot of lanes at a lot of different intersections. Plus, also one of the considerations in going to two-way traffic is that all the intersections, or all the signals along Main Avenue, Dakota Avenue, would also have to be converted from one-way signals to two-way signals. There's quite an expense, about $75,000 approximately, maybe a little less per intersection we'd end up spending per signal. And then we have the added cost of widening out the lanes if we wanted to have traffic flow at the same level of service that it flows right now in the downtown during our peak traffic. So looking at all those options, we started looking at, well, what are some other ideas that we could try on Main Avenue? And one of the things that we looked at was, what if we were to take the 3-lane section and reduce it down to a 2-lane section where we have extra room or extra width that can be utilized for furniture zones, for bump outs at the intersections to make the crossings shorter for pedestrians. Plus, it also provides us room to add some angle parking along the street. So it's a concept. We started taking a look at it because it met a lot of the objectives that we heard from the input we were getting from citizens. And once we started taking a look at it, we found that overall the intersection delays were not hindered by going from the 3-lane to 2-lane. It's a slight increase in delay, but we're talking single-digit % increases in delay at the intersections, really minimal compared to what we would see in the two-way operation. And one of the other things that I think that we'll see with it, and part of the idea on doing a pilot project is to get it out there and try to see what happens and how traffic reacts to it, and and see if it's a good thing or a bad thing for our traffic. But one of the things on Main Avenue, the 85th percentile is 29 miles per hour, and our speed limit's 20 miles an hour on Main Avenue. And we think that one of the biggest things we'd see from the reduction from 3 lanes to 2 lanes is reduction in the overall speeds on Main Avenue, because it's a lot harder when you have 2 lanes versus the 3. It's a lot harder to kind of weave around vehicles that are turning or doing things like that. So we think that we would see a decrease in the overall speed along the road. And let's see here. So when we started looking at those options, we started evaluating some different options. It it became clear that this was something that would be worth giving a try, reducing the lanes from 3 lanes to 2 lanes. Let's see. I'll talk about the project. The project itself, what we're looking at is on Main Avenue between 6th Street and 14th Street. What we're looking at doing is taking the easternmost lane of Main Avenue and repurposing it, turning it into angled parking, furniture zones, bump outs at the intersection. The way that we're looking at doing this is not through any construction at this time in order to make this a pilot project. We're just looking at doing some restriping, putting in some lane delineators. We're looking at some different types of barricades we can incorporate into the streetscaping, and that's its confluence. They'll be up here to talk about in a little bit to give you an idea of some of the ideas that we've came up with to make it to design good spaces for people to interact with. And also, one of the big things we're seeing is we started looking through the numbers. There's right now existing 150 spots out on Main Avenue, and we're going to see the east side. There's currently 75 spots on the east side, and we're going to probably, from what our initial numbers look like, we're going to just slightly more than double the 75 on the east side. So it's going to be 75 to 80 extra parking spots we're going to be able to incorporate into Main Avenue, which I think a lot of people will be excited about. If this is approved, the staff, we're going to continue to work with business and property owners on our final layouts. We've got some draft layouts that we'll be sharing with you, an idea of what we're proposing looks like, but we're going to continue working with the business and property owners on, we've had some meetings with them yesterday and on Friday also, discussing different various things on where to incorporate parking, where we still need loading zones, handicap spots, and various other things along the route. And right now we're proposing that we would, at this time, conclude the project by October 31st, 2014, and evaluate it for possible long-term implementation.
So with Heath going through kind of the project and what we're proposing here, we kind of want to talk about what are kind of the objectives we want to see happen. What are we trying to learn from this pilot project going forward? And one of the first things is will 2 traffic lanes support the current capacity and the future capacity needs of downtown? And according to the studies that Heath talked about earlier, the capacity is there according to the numbers, but we want to make sure that the community embraces what we're doing here. Some of the other things that we'll be looking at, and Heath handed on, were the benefits of the parking. We'll see double the amount of spaces roughly on Main Avenue, so we'll be able to see how that helps out with the parking situation in downtown Sioux Falls. The additional pedestrian amenities, so at those bump out areas, Chad Cuckers from Confluence is going to come up and kind of talk about some of the furniture zones and some of the things that we can do in those bump out areas to make it feel a little bit more pedestrian-like. With angled parking, that also helps because there's a greater distance from the sidewalk to where the traffic lanes are, so people are a greater distance away from the moving traffic, which also gives you a perception of safety as a pedestrian walking along the sidewalks. And then the narrow pedestrian crossing. So by removing a lane and doing those bump outs, you're only going to have to cross 2 lanes at the intersections instead of 3. So it's going to look like you're not having to cross as much, which also leads to kind of the pedestrian perception of safety at those intersections, along with the furniture zones that we're proposing. And then what we want to do throughout the process is really survey the community and see how they feel about the project. Is it working? And kind of get the feel. We've already held a couple outreach meetings with the current business owners and property owners along Main Avenue, so they've been in touch with us, and those were recently as yesterday and last week. There's an overall kind of support for this, wanting to see if it will work. Everyone's looking to see if it will work, and that's what we want to see. We want to see if this project will work and get the community support. I believe the community's given us the input to go forward with this, and that's the reason we're bringing it in front of you, and we'll be here later tonight with that. I'm going to introduce Chad Cucker from Confluence. He's going to come up and just kind of go through one of the draft layouts we have and kind of the design features that he's been working with us on this project.
Good afternoon. Again, Chad Cucker with Confluence. We're a planning and urban design firm in downtown Sioux Falls here. And like Dustin said, we've been happy to be working with community development in the Public Works Department. Heath's been doing all the traffic engineering, but we've been preparing graphics for the community involvement meetings and also working on design of the pedestrian spaces. There's really three things that are important that we're looking at. One would be public safety in those pedestrian spaces that are currently road, 2, identification, and 3, public feedback. So as far as public safety goes, we're really working with 2 different types of spaces. Primarily, there's public streetscape expansion spaces, which are at intersections where we're creating a larger bump out space. And then the other opportunity would be private opportunities for businesses to have an outdoor space or parklet. And currently the only one that's expressed concern for or excitement for that in this temporary pilot project is Parker's. So we'll be working with them moving forward, trying to create an outdoor dining space for them to use for the summer. But to create a safer environment, especially between, let's say, 10th and 12th, where there's a heavier pedestrian use, we'll be putting out some delineators, some traffic delineators, which are the white cylinders. Then also working with Public Works to find some sort of temporary, inexpensive, unique, and nice-looking barricade that we can use to actually provide an impact-resistant safety device from traffic, which are just indicated by the colorful blocks there. We're still working out the details, what those are. And then also there's an opportunity to reuse some of or borrow some of the large round concrete planters on Phillips Avenue at the 8th Street intersection to also kind of make that a safer area, but an opportunity for some colorful plants. As far as identification, we've been working on the branding, a logo that we can repeat throughout the space. We want to make sure that this doesn't come off looking like a construction zone. We want to make sure that it looks like a unique temporary pedestrian space. And to do that, one option or one thing we're looking at doing is actually painting those streetscape spaces like you see in the image there, a bright, a unique color, using some lettering, some text on the road to identify the space. We will be putting up some large temporary, like maybe 8-10 foot tall signs that can be read, to identify the project as you're passing through on major intersections such as 10th and 11th. And then also putting on some temporary signs on the parking meter posts so people can identify this corridor the entire way from 6th to 14th Street. And then as far as public feedback, we are working with media services and developing a survey where there can be a link or a QR code on the signage so people can provide feedback as far as what they think of the space. Do they think it's working? Do they feel safer from traffic? And we're still finalizing what that list of questions is, but to try to get some real feedback in addition to the traffic observations that Heath will be making. So I guess that in summary, we're just trying to work on a temporary short time frame to create unique, identifiable, safe spaces to support this pilot traffic program. I guess at that time I would see if there's any questions.
Any questions from the council? Councilman Jameson.
Chad, I think first off, and Heath, and I think the pilot program is a great idea. Just as a reminder, when Phillips Avenue was closed and they built a pedestrian mall down there, remember that? Mm-hmm. Some of us do, and then it only took a little while to figure out that, okay, that didn't work, and we tear it all out. Cost was enormous. Well, this temporary approach is a real good way to try it out. So I agree with that. I'm just trying to go through some of the images to figure out how many businesses would benefit, because if I understand it right, there's only a couple of, like you said, Parker's was the only one who's got a real major interest in it.
In doing something this first season. But I think the intention, and Dustin can maybe speak to it more, but is to create an infrastructure so that redevelopment on Main Avenue will have that opportunity that Phillips has now where you could potentially develop in streetscape spaces.
Please.
I agree. I'm all for that. Go, go, go. But I'm just looking and I'm not as familiar with all those businesses along that road, but after Parker's, what other retail businesses are there that could have people lounging around out front?
Well, we heard from one of the business owners that's actually redeveloping the property on 11th and Main, the vacant buildings, and they're very excited about the opportunity and feel that this would, help attract a wider range of tenants. So as far as current tenants, I don't. Go ahead.
Currently, between 6th and 14th Street, the two restaurants or retail areas that we have are Wiley's all the way down on 6th Street, and then also Parker's, which would be the restaurant. Wiley's is going to have a extended bump out area, furniture zone already because of it's at the intersection, so that would benefit them already. And then Parker's is the other one. Most of the other businesses are office space at this point, but then like Chad had stated, there's some redevelopment happening at the intersection of 11th and Main, so there's potentially something that would go in there, but at this time, because it's a temporary, likely will be done with the pilot project before anything gets in there, but it does show an opportunity if something were to go in there and get in there that we do have the opportunity to do it.
Very good, yeah. Good.
Yeah. Any other questions? Okay, I'm going to continue on with Councilman Jameson's questioning. Can you go back to that first slide that shows aerial, well, actually the one that's the draft layout? There you go. And I guess I was the same thing when I first saw this. I like the ideal after we've had some discussions about it, but I also saw we've got vacant buildings here on the south end where we're talking about trying to encourage business. We're already doubling parking. I thought that would have been a good area too for one of those build outs. So that was my only statement or question on that, why we didn't do something on that end to try to encourage that development even more as we see that it's struggling on that end of the block.
We actually had conversations. One of the second vacant building there so it would be to the north. He was at one of the outreach meetings and was very supportive of this project, and we talked with them about the capability of being done in the future. At this point, it is possible. This isn't a final layout or anything. We're still working through the drafts. If we get approved tonight with this, we still will not probably implement this till mid-July, so we still have time to work with some of the adjacent property owners on some of those situations.
And then tonight, what we are approving is only the pilot project, correct?
Yeah, what we need approval for from City Council is a blessing of the pilot project, but also City Council has to approve any angled parking in Sioux Falls, and so since we're doing angled parking with this project, that has to be approved. So that's all part of the motion, that it's approving the pilot project as well as the angled parking that we're going to be incorporating.
Okay. Thank you. Councilman Jameson.
Sorry, I meant to ask, just how much are we spending for this pilot, just in total?
We're still getting some of the material quotes back for various parts of it, but it's going to be about $8,000 total on materials. And
how much?
About $8,000 on materials for striping and the delineators and whatnot. And the a lot of it's reusable too. So
Great, good job.
Councilman Kiley?
With the pocket park concept, is that actually going to be raised in the pilot, or only if it's approved long-term, so that it is curb or sidewalk level?
What we're looking at right now is a couple options. One would be a fairly simple deck that would raise that up about 6 inches. But the other option might be we could actually put down a bond breaker type material and pour a temporary concrete slab on it. But what we've talked about to date is that it would be safer and make people feel better if that space was raised, in addition to having some sort of barricades along it.
And so that would be included as part of the pilot project then?
I think we're still working out the details of whether or not that's part of this project or part of Parker's costs. I don't.
Okay.
know the answer to that right now.
Okay. And a second question, and this might be possibly for Heath, you guys can decide, time-wise to parallel park versus angle park, what's the difference? I'm assuming parking, pulling into the space, would be a lot quicker than parallel parking pulling in. Backing out, though, might be a different situation.
Yeah, it's backing out's a little bit slower movement. It'll be a lot faster to pull into the spots. It's a lot of people struggle getting initially into the parallel spots where sometimes it can take someone easily 30 seconds to park in a parallel parking spot, and pulling out of an angle parking spot, the big thing on that is just people having to be aware and look at what traffic's doing, and that's just the nature of that type of parking is one of the things that we expect to slow down traffic on Main Avenue also.
Okay, thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you.
Yeah, just a quick question. This is a pilot project. How long will it last?
It's right now we're proposing to end it by October 31st, but one of the big parts of this too is going to be the surveys from the citizens, and depending on the type of feedback we're getting back that's going to determine a lot of what we're doing at the end of October on if we're looking at doing a permanent implementation or something shorter term. A lot of the materials we're putting in for like the paint and pavement markings are shorter term materials. It's like a tape. We're putting down a tape for the parking stalls that we'll pick back up late this fall, and it's depending on what the citizens say, we'll have a lot to do on where we want to do going forward.
Okay, thank you.
Councilor Jameson.
Heath, I suppose that public parking hasn't proposed to put any new parking meters in, would they? Or they just kind of skip every other few? Or
We've had a lot of discussions with this, and we're still working out all the details with public parking, and I don't know if Dustin wants to talk more about it, but right now what we're proposing is that we're going to go forward with from the metered parking to timed parking zones is what we're looking at. For the pilot nature of this project, instead of trying to go in and install 80 new parking meters along Main Avenue, we're looking at doing timed parking zones over the course of this pilot project. And that's probably one of the big questions is, depending on what we want to do, depending on how it turns out for a permanent solution, is how do we want to address parking going forward. So
I agree with that. I think that's a good approach. It matters.
Any other questions, comments? Thank you very much, Heath. Before we end the meeting today, I did want to, since we have Public Works here, allow them to update us on the events that have happened over the last few days. We've seen a little rain in the area, and I thought this might be a good time to update the citizens.
Thank you. Regan Smith, Emergency Manager, City of Sioux Falls. As everybody knows, the city was impacted by a significant storm event over the last 24 hours. City departments have been working over that time period to mitigate some of the issues and prepare for what's coming. The public safety departments are kind of back to their normal routine at this time, but Public Works and the Park Department are still hard at it, and we have activated our Emergency Operations Center, and so our multi-agency coordination team is supporting that Public Works and Park response. 211 Center is working with citizens, taking calls if they need any assistance, and with flood response, and then forwarding those on to response agencies such as the Red Cross. We have provided some mutual aid to neighboring communities, Rock Rapids and Harrisburg. We've provided sandbags, and we're continuing to coordinate with Lincoln County, Minnehaha County, and the state of South Dakota, and then all of our community partners who we normally work with, and then are in almost constant communication with the National Weather Service. Over the next few days, our objectives are going to be empty the stormwater holding areas to increase those storage areas for possible future rainfall, investigate areas where we've seen some increased water infiltration with sanitary sewer system, investigate and remove restrictions that are preventing full capacity of the sanitary and storm sewer system, monitor the weather and prepare for potential community impact, and then as always coordinate our messaging for the public to keep them informed of the situation. With that, I'll let Mark go into more of the specifics on the sanitary and storm system.
Thank you. Thank you, Counselor, giving us the opportunity to speak, and we're here to answer questions as well. The teams worked through the night to move the wastewater primarily through the system. The storm sewer systems worked good. We are working to try to drain them both today. We're assisting in some of that. We're having some pretty high drainage pond concerns in that southwest part of town. So we want to accelerate draining those so we can ultimately get them back to capacity. So if we get some more rain tonight, there's a chance, but we're getting more prepared for tomorrow night's forecast. Primarily, that's going good. We did get a concern from Councilor Erickson, and we're responding to that. It's a fairly large pipe that got eroded out. We'll get it stabilized tonight, and then we're going to do a private contract to have it reset. We haven't had too many of those. The integrity of the system has been fairly well intact. And so now primarily as you try to just drain a lot of these ponds, this amount of flow moves a lot of either plant material, cattails, trees, branches down the drainage system, and the teams are continually around the clock cleaning off grates to prevent restrictions. On the sanitary sewer side, I just thought I'd give you kind of an overview of some of the key pieces of infrastructure that we have that we work with, and I'll see if this is on. I won't worry about that. Just looking here at the system, there's that large green line that essentially follows the Big Sioux River from about the Empire Mall and then following 229 all the way up to Falls Park. That amount of infrastructure has all been rebuilt. That's essentially what we call the Sioux River South. Lift Station 218, that's more commonly referred to as the Tut Hill Lift Station. And then the central main that goes from 218 all the way up to Falls Park. That's essentially new pipe. It's larger. It's nearly glass lined, and so flow flows in that very well, which has been extremely helpful in this high flow event. When we get up to the upper portions where it says equalization basin, lime lagoons, and the Brandon lift station, that was that discussion we had the other night about the new VFDs and what have you. There's a second PDF. You grab that second PDF underneath there with the aerial. This just gives you a little bit more of a zoomed in image of when we moved that amount of wastewater last night. We were pushing about 57.5 million gallons of wastewater through the plant. You know, in perspective, on a typical day, we're at 13 to 16 million gallons per day. So we were really taking the infrastructure to its edge. There was points in the middle of the night where we were walking a tightrope on capacity. But the first one, where it says equalization basin, that's a concrete storage volume that we can actually shave flow off. Instead of taking it into the pipe, we can cut gates open and start to fill that. That's like having a large bathtub right next to your pipe to give some relief to the pipe. Because downstream with the Brandon lift station, you certainly never want to get to a point where you're taking your lift stations to capacity. We were close. Our next option was these lime lagoons. They're essentially a lined lagoon. They would function just like an equalization basin. So we quickly mobilized pumps when we were starting to pick up even more flow. And those two red lines that are pointing into those two lime lagoons, those are temporary pumping systems that we mobilized to put wastewater into those. We're going to be putting wastewater into those for a period of time to continue to shave off the flows until we catch up the system. But those have been a godsend to us, so we could keep the integrity of the downstream lift station and avoid discharging wastewater to the Big Sioux River. So big win, and essentially we're going to continue to manage these high flows. Hopefully we'll get a break from the rain events. The teams have been working extremely hard, and they're committed to continuing to work hard until we get through this. Other than that, there has been a few sanitary sewer backups that we respond to, and in some cases it's because the mains are not taking it, very localized. In many cases, though, we'll go out and we'll jet the line, and there'll be no relief, so it becomes then a property owner's issue, and we go in and tell them, and then they'll hire a company to actually come out. We've asked residents to continue to conserve water. And also the ground being so saturated to avoid watering their lawns. If they can, it would certainly just reduce the amount of infiltration that's happening. Primarily, that's the key things. I know Parks has been working hard to manage the parks that get inundated during these events, clean bike trails. There's been some trees down in some of the parks, and so they've been addressing those. But for the most part, we're on the recovery stage. We've still got a distance to go. There's still a lot of wastewater in the piping system that we're going to be working on for a number of days. But certainly in the core part of the town, when the heavy rains came in 2004, and this council supported spending about $40 million into the core part of the city, we're just not seeing very many issues in the core part, and so those have been very good investments for the customers. And the same here. We've been seeing extremely high flows, but as you look at, as you envision a tree, we've essentially, for the city, gone through and either lined or replaced a lot of the large diameter trunk sewers. And so the trunk of a tree our trunk is in decent shape. Many of those have been replaced. It's now going into the branches. We've got those sophisticated flow meters that are strategically located throughout the city to allow us to really focus on some of those key branches, and then we can go after some of those high inflow areas with good data. And so that's where we're at really now. And now that we're kind of past the triage, now we can really start to focus on assessment and what areas do we need to put additional focus on. With that, we're here to answer any questions.
Any questions? Councilman Staggers?
Yeah, this doesn't have anything to do with last night, but as you were talking, this thought came to my mind. In regard to another occasion when we had a water problem in downtown Sioux Falls with the Touch of Europe, for example, the Touch of Europe is still closed, my understanding, and is the city providing compensation for that restaurant that was really damaged?
I'd have to check on that. That would be risk administration that I'd have to ask. Essentially, those are unfortunate consequences, but that hydrant did get upset in the cold part of the winter and did flow into that structure. But I don't know that off the top of my head. We connect them with risk administration, but I don't know where that if there was a claim there or not.
Okay. Thank you.
Councilman Jameson?
Mark, that Brandon lift station, do we actually provide? No, I won't ask you about that. All right, that's just an inside joke. Okay, so on the infiltration, did I do the math right? It's 4 times as much as the normal flow?
Mm-hmm.
And are you thinking that you do have the right monitoring systems in place today or through this last event to know where the infiltration is coming from after you, like you say, get past this hump? You'll be able to go back to enough places where there's a good data source to tell you where those fixes need to be made?
Yeah, they're in, we'll be able to identify large basins, and then we'll start to walk up those with cameras and visualize. In some cases, the teams can now just go out and pop manholes and see, okay, how much clear water's coming, say, at 10 o'clock in the morning. So then we can actually go, okay, here's an area where we ought to camera, because we can cover a lot of area just by pulling manhole covers and going, how much of this does look like extraneous flow. And some of that can be coming in from cracks in the side of a manhole. Some of it can be coming in from a joint in our main line. Some can be coming in the service lines and the cracks, or it can be purged in from like sump pump discharge. And so it can be a combination of those things. Some of what we can see that becomes one of the hardest things to combat is the sump pump discharge, because it's a pressurized system. It doesn't take but 4 or 5 sump pumps pumping into an 8-inch line to overtax it. And that's where we're going to be focusing our efforts here in the few days ahead. Really trying to identify where's those basins that are seeing the most significant spikes, and then we'll take the teams and the cameras into those zones and really hoping to make progress.
And as well, last night I kept getting notices on my phone that kept,
Right.
Go and hide someplace, kind of things. And then I saw your email later about, encouraging everybody to stop using water because the system was getting overtaxed. There's got to be a way for you guys, and to notify all of us who are water users the same way in this way, because I had no idea until later I checked my email. And are you working on a system? Is there a plan? Is there a method?
Well, we've our IVR system, the interactive voice, the push calls that you either get from the school districts, or we've got that same system. We just don't have it as robust as like the school system. We utilized it last night. We had 2 targeted neighborhoods that we were starting to see manholes getting surcharged, more water coming into those lines than what they could evacuate out. And so we quickly worked with our utility billing team. GIS can draw a line around an affected neighborhood, lift out all those addresses and phone numbers. They sent them to our utility billing. We wrote the message, and then they ultimately went out. And we did push calls into 2 neighborhoods that I think greatly reduced the number of backups. We gave them insight on reduce water usage now. Take precautions to protect your property. Here would be some steps, and we had said like a towel and a 5-gallon bucket of water over a floor drain can give you some relief until we get this sanitary sewer evacuated. So we gave them that kind of information in a push call, and we try to utilize all those kind of steps. We also, once we were out there, we sent teams out there to knock on some doors. As soon as we got a phone call from one person in central part of town, once you respond to that and you start to see water coming up in a manhole, you know that you're at risk of affecting properties. And so once we address that particular property as best we can, we actually mobilized a tanking unit. And so we started to take water out of a manhole. We just actually cut it off about an hour ago, but we had 4 tanker trucks running around the clock. We were hauling wastewater to prevent properties from being inundated. And so you had a lot of teams working for you last night to try to reduce the impact on our customers' properties.
And Mark, what neighborhoods were those that were?
That particular one was close to 31st and Center. And so really that area between Minnesota and Pendar Lane, and really 33rd to probably 29th or 28th, we did a push call. That was the boundaries of the push call. And we got very few. We had, after we did the push call and we sent people out into the field, we talked to those residents, and a couple of them said that they could see wastewater coming up in their floor drain, but it never came out onto the floor. And so they could actually take steps to protect their property. And then we immediately started hauling wastewater. And our teams can spin up very quickly. And so that's what they did, and very little property damage because of it. Yeah.
Thank you.
There was another neighborhood up near John Morrell, east of Cliff Avenue, kind of by Sioux Nation. That's very low. And when our when our outfall sewer started to get really deep, we did do a push call to them. That is a little bit harder situation to protect them, but we worked to take flow off that line as quickly as possible. We still haven't seen too much in the way of backups up there. We have at least 2 confirmed as of last night. Throughout the afternoon, we had more people actually going out knocking on doors to see how many people were potentially impacted, and then if they were, the phone number for risk administration, things of that manner. So trying to get them the information that they need.
Okay.
Any other questions?
Any other questions? Just one statement, Mark. A few years ago, you brought the council a program to start replacing storm sewer. We accepted that program, and yesterday and the day before, I did a lot of driving around that area. I thank you. It's working, and I hope that we continue this and get our storm sewers up to date. I'd like to hear them be more than just manageable. So, thank you.
You're welcome. Thank you.
Any other items for the council to bring up at this time? Okay, with that, I will adjourn this meeting.